Does science refute religion? Is faith the only path to truth? Can science and religion coexist? Today we'll be briefly discussing these questions in regards to Aquinas' philosophy of natural science. The later canonized Thomas Aquinas was a philosopher and theologian who was born in Rocca Secca, Italy in the year 1225. He's thought to be one of the most influential medieval scholastic thinkers, combining faith with philosophical and natural principles of reason. Aquinas' education began at the Benedictine house in Naples, Italy, where he extensively studied the works of Aristotle. These works would eventually greatly influence his later writings. During the Middle Ages, the struggle to unite theology and philosophy had become a major topic of debate and discussion. The Islamic thinker Averroes had already approached this issue with his theory of the double truth. Averroes' theory posited that there were two types of knowledge, theological and philosophical. He believed that both types of knowledge occasionally arrived at contradictory truths and served as separate sources of knowledge overall. It is important to note that although this theory posits that theological and philosophical knowledge can potentially present contradictory truths, the two sources of knowledge may not necessarily be detrimental to each other. The double truth theory simply holds that separate theological and philosophical truths do not necessarily need to be reconciled. This means that two views can stand in tension with one another, with neither view being incorrect in its own respect, theologically or philosophically. It's important to bear this theory in mind given that the Middle Ages were a golden age of discovery for Islamic thinkers. Avicenna alone is credited with writing over 100 works on a vast number of topics such as geometry, music, logic, physics, philosophy, astronomy, and medicine. The Islamic thinker Abd al-Rahman al-Sufi wrote the Book of Fixed Stars, in which he laid out a comprehensive synthesis of stars based on Ptolemy's Almagest. The scholar al-Biruni authored the Book of Instruction, in which he laid out his astronomical understanding of the position of the planets and their motions. These are, of course, just a few of the examples that demonstrate the importance of scientific practices within Islam during the Middle Ages. Consider these important discoveries given that the theory of double truth posits that religion and science aren't necessarily detrimental to each other as explained earlier. On the other hand, St. Thomas Aquinas' views namely challenge the anti-Aristotelian nature of Averroes' theory in stating that both kinds of knowledge ultimately come from God. This idea stands in contrast to the theory of double truth in proposing that theological and philosophical knowledge were not only undetrimental to each other, but could in fact be compatible and non-contradictory, whereas the theory of double truth, the knowledge sources were separate sources of knowledge overall. So what is the significance of a theologian such as Thomas Aquinas in the context of natural sciences? Aquinas endeavors to use Aristotelian thought to justify the rise of science in companionship with religion in the Church, defying the fundamental belief that the search for order in the universe beyond Scripture would be fruitless. Aquinas makes significant arguments in favor of the natural sciences in his book Summa Contra Gentiles. Written in 1264, the Summa Contra Gentiles seeks namely to defend doctrine against non-believers. In chapter 2 of the book, Aquinas lays out his famous 4 ways to make a case that the consideration of creatures is useful for the instruction of faith. For our purposes, we will refer to the consideration of creatures, as mentioned, as practicing the natural sciences. Aquinas' theological motivation for pursuing the natural sciences is based off of the idea that the observation of creation enables us to admire and reflect upon God's wisdom. Aquinas' second case is that it leads to the admiration of God's sublime power and therefore inspires reverence for her. His third case is that it incites the souls of men to love God's righteousness. His fourth and final case is that the practice of natural sciences endows men with a certain likeness to God's perfection. This is because by knowing himself, he beholds all other things in himself. It is for these reasons that the practice of natural science and observation have a major place in supporting the Christian faith. Now that we've established the purpose of natural science in communion with faith according to Aquinas, let's explore his implementation of the natural sciences in connection with Aristotle. Let's begin by talking a little bit about Aquinas' Aristotelian cosmological argument for the existence of God. Aristotle and Aquinas both believe that all things must have a cause or prior reason for occurrence. Therefore, there must be an ultimate first cause. Aristotle posits that the cosmos have been set into motion by an unmoved prime mover. Aquinas lays out 5 proofs of the existence of God in his Summa Theologiae. The first proof by Aquinas states that whatever is in motion now was once at rest until moved by something else. Yet, if there were an infinite amount of movers, then actual motion never would have started. Therefore, there must be a first unmoved mover. Aquinas refers to this first quote-unquote prime mover as God. A second major theme worth emphasizing is the importance of the observation and experience for both Aquinas and Aristotle. Aristotle famously states, "Nothing is found in the intellect which was not first found in the senses." This does not mean that experience is the end to our knowledge. Knowledge can be deepened through our intellect and to bear on our sensory experiences to create propositions. This allows us to further develop our knowledge and understanding. Lastly, we'll tackle the idea of souls and the body. Aquinas accepts Aristotle's notion from the De Anima too, which says that the soul and the body are very clearly one and inseparable, like seal and wax. The soul is the formal cause of a being, the efficient cause for its motions, and its final cause or purpose. The body is to matter as the soul is to the form or potentiality of the body. Let's use the analogy of sculpting a marble statue. The block of marble is what composes the statue, but it does not yet have shape. If we begin to chip away at the statue, we then create a beautiful image or form. Think of the marble as the matter of the statue and the shape as the form. In adopting the natural scientific themes of Aristotle in correlation with faith, Aquinas helped to advocate for the idea that Greek philosophical knowledge and rhetoric could complement Christian doctrine. It's important to realize that in the medieval era, the church greatly influenced the standard of what or what was not permissible to believe in regards to science and its correlation to doctrine. In many senses, doctrine was presented by the church as a single, absolute truth. It was theologians such as Aquinas that did the unthinkable and married the principles of faith and reason to create a fresh perspective on their combined usage. The relationship between science and reason would become a major controversy at the University of Paris years after Aquinas' death. This debate would rage on for many years and would ultimately mold the way we view science and religion today.